Are you looking to become a Tier 1 operator in the gaming world? Elevate your games with Blacksite Studio Terrain.
All right, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Hopefully that's not too loud. I'm afraid it might be. Hold on 1 second. All right, I'm trying to experiment today with a little bit of music, a little bit of some licensed music I have. To make our stream a little bit better. Okay, cool. Thanks very much, Skoback, for letting me know what's going on here on our sound test, so to speak. Okay, guys. So there's going to be two kind of small streams today, at least for me here on SitRep Podcast. We're going to do the one that we have scheduled, which is for 3 p.m. It starts in about a little less than 2 hours. That's going to be where I am taking on LSR 2590. That's Dylan from On Tabletop. We're going to be doing part of Operation Gothic Serpent, a small part of Operation Gothic Serpent. This is more commonly known as the Battle of Mogadishu, made famous, movie Black Hawk Down, the film Black Hawk Down, the book also Black Hawk Down, I should say. Anyway, we're going to be doing that a little bit later today. But for now, also wanted to put in a little bit of time on our ongoing 13 days to 13 hours project that we have going on here on SitRep Podcast. So again, just for people who might be checking this out later, 13 days to 13 hours is the task that SitRep 6 Gianna has put us to, where we are going to be. We have 13 days worth of time, 13 days worth of man hours, so to speak, to put together a game to recreate part of the 2012 Benghazi attack and the various responses to that attack that took place on that night, September 11th to 12th, 2012. There's going to be several games, or there's going to be 2, maybe 3 games in that project. There's going to be the main game, which takes place at the U.S. Embassy compound in Benghazi. And then the part that I'm in charge of is the so-called transit game. This is the game that tracks how well operators from GRS and other government agencies are able to get from the CIA Annex compound that's about 1.2 miles away from the actual embassy outpost compound that's under attack by hostile insurgents, how fast they can get there. Now, historically, they weren't allowed to go there. Again, it depends on whose version of the story you read. It's very, I don't want to say politically charged, but there's a lot of confusion. A lot of stuff is still classified. It's after 12 p.m., so I'll go ahead and say, long story short, they weren't, the people that wanted to respond to the attack did not get to respond when they wanted to. They didn't get to respond right away. There was about a 35-minute delay. And depending again on who you ask, that 35-minute delay could have been pretty decisive as far as whether or not those guys, how that night could have gone. So what we're doing with our game is postulating if those 6 GRS operators had been allowed to leave right off the bat, could they have made a difference? So I'm in charge of that part of the project, getting the GRS operators, running a different game that gets the GRS operators from the CIA Annex to the embassy compound. And of course, the various Libyan local factions of insurgencies. Some of them are friendly, some of them are neutral or ambivalent, some of them are outwardly hostile, some of them are fighting each other, and these GRS guys have to kind of make their way through that to get to this compound as fast as they can. So obviously my part of the game is going to be, my map has to be at least a couple miles wide. It's going to be a piece of the Benghazi city. This cannot be a miniature game. Your miniature table would be the size of a golf course. So we're going to be running it electronically, and that means making electronic pieces. So that's what we're doing here. So pulling up my friendly Photoshop. Okay, so as you may have seen on some other threads, we've been working on various pieces for both quote-unquote good guys and bad guys. Here is the unarmed interpreter that was there. The plaid shirt might seem a little strange for Benghazi, Libya, in North Africa in September. This e-miniature, so to speak, was painted, again, air quotes, to conform to a miniature that Gianna already has physically painted. Because what's going to happen is, okay, I'm going to run the transit game probably between Gaz and Gianna, although that's not been 100% decided. And then the outcome of that game is going to determine, in part, the starting conditions for the main tabletop 28mm game that they're going to run in miniature up there at SitRep HQ. So there has to be at least some consistency between my electronic figures here and the actual 28mm figures on the table, because the same characters, quote-unquote, are going to be transitioning from my game to the tabletop game, and if they survive that, they're going to come back and we're going to get to our exfiltration game, where they have to get from the embassy compound back to the CIA annex, and that is possibly the third game in our series. And what else do we have here? I have some good guys. Okay. So obviously, they can't all look the same. We have bad guys. We have an unarmed interpreter that was along with the GRS operators. And of course, we have our full-blown armed good guys here. Now, obviously, we have different weapons. So this, I don't know if you guys can see this here on chat, hopefully. What you're able to see here in my layer list is you can switch out the weapons right here, at once. So basically, I made up one template, and with this one template, I haven't counted it up for the other two figures, but for the good guys here, the main, GRS operators here. If you wanted to get crazy, you could get 740 combinations of different colors, weapons, helmets, shoes, pants, skin tones, helmet colors, armor colors, and things like that. If you actually take all that and multiply it out, you wind up with 740 possible combinations. You could paint 740 miniatures, air quotes, and have them all be unique in about, I don't know, however long it takes you to do 700, to hit Control S for save 740 times, a couple hours. Of course, that's after we did the whole, designing the miniature. But the miniature, again, the file is designed that way. So right now I have the saw selected. I can get rid of the saw. I can replace it with a sniper rifle. Hopefully you guys are seeing that. I can replace the sniper rifle with an M4, kind of a platform. I can replace that with an M203. Well, I call it an M203, but it's really an HK. I can't remember the rest of the nomenclature right now. It's a handheld standalone grenade launcher. So we have 4 different picks here for weapons. Let's go back to, what are we looking at here? Let's go back to the M4. All right, so here he is with an M4. We have different color shirts that we can put him in. Green. Again, this is just by activating different layers. A dark gray, darker blue, darker red, brighter red, and so on and so forth. Now he's got no shirt on. Oh no! Many mistakes. There we go. Different color pants, different color boots, and we even have different skin tones because, again, not everybody was, from the same background that was involved in this battle. So, we're trying to get as many details as we can, at least close to correct. We're not going to get everything correct, that's for sure. Way too much of this material is still classified. Way too much of it is still being redacted in official State Department and CIA reports. And what's out there is hotly contested. I don't know how this is in Canada or Europe, but here in the U.S., the Benghazi attack is still a pretty hotly debated issue in various political forums. A lot of people, because so little is known, there's a lot of blame going around as far as how this went bad. So again, long story short, we're going to be using the movie 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, as our source of truth. I know I feel like I have to take a shower after just saying that. I'm using a Michael Bay movie as a source of truth for a historical war game. I really need to go get myself to the doctor. Um, but it's, as sad as it sounds, it's the best we have right now. Because again, so much of this material is still, in the shadow, so to speak. But that's okay, no worries. It's all fine. So we have our bad guy here so far. Our bad guy here is, again, he's got 2 or 3 different choices for hair. I think I have old hair and new hair. Or I should say old hair and young hair. Hello. Okay, yeah, there he is a little later in life. We have 3 choices of beard. We have young beard, old beard, and no beard. Go away, Mr. Beard. Yeah, so again, right there's like 12 choices as far as different paint schemes, for lack of a better term. We have different hats. We're not trying to be funny here with our gangster hats or whatever. If you actually check out the movie or read some of the reports, a lot of these militias were basically kids. Or young men or whatever running around in a very turbulent period of Libya's history, and there was a lot of soccer on television at the time. So a lot of again, we're not trying to be funny here, but a lot of the uniforms that seem to, I say uniforms, a lot of the gear that the opposition was actually wearing at the time were actually like soccer jerseys. So we've got some of those on here as well. Soccer jerseys, hats. Some are wearing flip-flops. Some are wearing regular shoes. For the opposition, again, sometimes we're having a little bit of fun with the color schemes, because how often do you get to paint something like this? This was sort of based on one of my girlfriend Glades Runner's or Jennifer's requests for some hot pink and some lime green, just to see if we could put that on a miniature. So some of the people up in Chicago are actually putting this on their 28mm miniatures. I don't think they're using this exact design, but they're using these kind of colors. Not on all the miniatures or even a large number, just a couple, just for fun. This is kind of a serious topic, so we don't want to get too super serious about it as far as our content goes. It is still a game and we're trying to be fun, or we're trying to have fun with it. So again, like soccer type jerseys. I'm not going to actually research what soccer clubs were playing or football clubs were playing that day, and what these guys were watching and what their jerseys were. Just some generally, soccer type kind of clothes. Get rid of those. Again, just different colors. I also, I think, have a little bit of a sleeveless t-shirt there. And then if you want to get completely, again, it was in the middle of the night. We have guys running around with no shirt on at all. Different color pants, different color shoes, and some of the shoes are flip-flops. So there we have green flip-flops, and I think we also have blue flip-flops. So three choices of shoes: blue, green, and like white, like regular Nike sneakers. If I can find them real fast. Where are they? Where are my Nikes? There we go, just like general sneakers. 3 basic weapons on my one-handed shooters. That is this submachine gun we have here. Let me find my other weapons here. Where are my weapons? I also have an AKSU, kind of a carbine there. A folded up stock on a cut down AK sort of a system. And I have a pistol somewhere. What the hell did I do with my pistol? Oh, there we go. Yeah, a pistol. So again, 3 kinds of hair, 3 kinds of beard, 2 kinds of hat, 5 kinds of shirt, 4 or 5 different kinds of pants, 3 colors of shoes, 3 weapons. You multiply all that out, you have something like 1,000 choices here. Obviously, we won't use all 1,000 choices, but suffice it to say, we've got plenty of options here that we can very quickly build a super snap fast, realistically ragtag-looking Libyan militia. And again, some of them were friendly, some of them were ambivalent, some of them were hostile. And part of the reason I kind of agreed to undertake this challenge is, from a wargaming perspective, it seemed to me pretty interesting. Because you've got, okay, it's one thing to have a Black Hawk Down sort of a game where you've got guys in vehicles, semi-armored vehicles. They're trying to get from point A to point B in a city in chaos. And we're trying to get to to help somebody out who's in big trouble. So there's a little bit of the Benghazi from a wargaming perspective can almost be seen as a microcosm of like Somalia, Black Hawk Down kind of a thing. You've got guys in vehicles that are way under armored for the job, driving through a city in chaos. They're trying to get from point A to point B, and point B are people in distress. In Libya, it's a embassy under attack. In Black Hawk Down, it's kind of a crash helicopter site. Okay. What's a little bit different about Benghazi is that some of the people running around with AKs are actually on your side. There were militias in place that were actually friendly to the United States. 17 February, Martyrs of 17 February were their name. Sometimes they would help, sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they just decided not to show up. So again, in the game, it was interesting to me to kind of think about, okay, how do I design a war game where the other side, you never know how many guys they have. The guys that show up might be friendly, might be hostile, might be ambivalent, and you can switch back and forth between those three states. There's ambivalent militia out there. The GRS guys open fire on them because they misidentify them as hostile. Now they're hostile. You've got February 17th guys out there who are going to show up to be friendlies, and they see how many enemies there are. They get scared and they go home. They turn into ambivalent. You have hostiles that become ambivalent. A lot of the hostile militias that were out there pretty much just to loot the place. And once they got done looting, they turned around and went home. They went from hostile to ambivalent. And then you've got ambivalent that become hostile and ambivalent that become friendly. Again, there's this interpreter that goes along with them, and as we see in the film, sometimes these interpreters are able to talk to these February 17th guys that are a little bit reluctant to join the fight and kind of, re-recruit them. Like, come on, guys, you join this militia. This is why we're paying you. I don't know if they were getting paid, but this is why you're in the militia, was to help us. This is go time. And so you've got these three states, and then you've got the militia that can literally flex between all three of these states. And rather than have it be completely random, I wanted to build some factors for the good guys to influence that. Every time they fire, the enemy gets a little bit more hostile. The city gets more agitated. There's also random civilian vehicles that drive in the way, random civilian crowds that run in the way, panicked under fire. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be kind of nuts. It's going to be a small game, but it's going to be unusual. So again, I do a lot of other stuff, and when this project was first kind of brought out to me, I was like, I don't know, my plate's kind of full right now. But then when they started describing how this militia was going to be so nebulous, for lack of a better word, so dynamic, I was like, you know what? That sounds like it might be a fun game. I've never designed a game like that. I'm gonna take a swing at it. Is the long and short of it. Is the plaid guy an interpreter or something along those lines? Yes, he is an interpreter. He is, in fact, the interpreter. If I can find him again. The plaid guy, to answer Skoback's question, the plaid guy is, there was an unarmed interpreter with the GRS team in Benghazi, September 11, 12, 2012. So we needed an unarmed guy here. Now, the reason he's wearing plaid... I don't think the real interpreter was wearing plaid in Benghazi. It was a hot night. But the reason he's wearing plaid is because, again, Gianna's got a figure painted up more or less like this. And again, the miniatures, the playing pieces in my electronic game are going to eventually migrate, so to speak, in the narrative over to their tabletop game. So we wanted at least some of my electronic game pieces to look like the miniatures that they're going to have on the table. So in the streams that we're having every Thursday and every Sunday, we're talking back and forth, and we're trying to coordinate a little bit and making sure that at least some of our pieces look the same. They keep asking me how I'm painting. I say paint. How I'm designing my guys, and I keep telling them, you guys tell me, because again, I've got over 1,000 choices on this guy right here, Captain Caveman. I've got almost 1,000 choices on him. Right, I could do for you guys literally right now with the click of a few mouse keys. Painting a real 28mm figure is a lot more of a challenge. So I'm easy, so to speak, as far as what our guys are going to be. It's a lot easier to change my figures than their figures. So those guys, those militia guys I was just showing you, are all one-handed shooters. They're either, again, pistol, submachine gun, or carbine. What I also wanted to design was a series of two-handed shooters. These are guys that are going to be a lot more, AK type guys, and so on and so forth. So, they're going to be a little bit more like this. So, we're probably not going to finish this today because, again, I do have another stream I have to get ready for. But just for now, we're going to have a few minutes to get started on this. We're going to start working on on our two-handed shooters. Then after this, I've already got technicals done. I've got some technicals done already. Basically beat up junk pickup trucks with a douche on the back. And if we even need those, I don't even know if we're going to need those. And maybe some civilians. And then I'll just have to design the map. The game is mostly designed. It still has to be play tested. I just have to finish making the pieces and then draw up the map. And then we'll probably have a play testing stream somewhere along the line, probably in 2 weeks, maybe 3 at the outside. We'll have a play testing stream, and then if the play test goes well, depending on how it goes, and depending on how they're doing over there with the real game, the game that's going to take a lot of work, the actual 28mm compound game, we'll be ready to go. So here is a iPhone photograph of a sketch I did. No matter how easy it is to draw something in a computer, it's always easier to draw it first on paper. So drew it out on some typing paper. I might change a few little things. I'm not entirely happy with this hand. It's easiest to draw something on paper first, trust me. But what happens then is, oops. Sometimes that's a little bit better there. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit easier to change things in the computer. Like I didn't have to redraw that whole hand there just because I was unhappy with the way those 4 fingers are on his forearm. This is the way we're drawing the figure. Again, you notice that his weapon hands are all like posed to fire a two-handed weapon. And then what we'll do is we'll fill in some two-handed weapons. Probably mostly AKs. I don't think there were too many snipers here. I'll have to do some more reading and consult with the other people on the project to make sure, but this is actually going to be a little bit of an easier file. There won't be like 3 different kinds of weapons. I've already got the head drawn, the head, the beard, the hats, that's all going to be the same as for our one-handed shooters. So yeah, now we're just going to put some progress here on this two-handed shooter. Oh, it's your fault he was flat. Oh, that's right. She was doing that for you, wasn't she, Skoback? I remember that stream now. There you go, Skoback. You have now officially, contributed to the 13 Days Project. Welcome to the team. I'm going to send you some more work to do. Now that you're an official team member of SITREP. Okay, so again, this is the pencil sketch. Take a photograph of it, email it to yourself, open up the file, and drop it here in Photoshop. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is open up a new layer, new. Yes, I want a new layer, dummy. And what that layer is going to be is my outline. So I want my outline to be black, obviously. I have my Wacom pad, which of course is not working because life hates me. I know I say this every single stream I try to do Photoshop, guys, but it's because OBS changes the print driver on, or it does something to my display driver. And once that happens, my Wacom pad no longer really works the way it should. But just for this quick stream, I'm going to go ahead and tough my way through it. I'm not going to start and stop Photoshop over again. So we're basically just going to get a what's the word here? An outline of our outline, for lack of a better term. Now this might look a little weird. Like, you already have an outline, dude. You drew it in pencil, you photographed it, you sent it to yourself. Why are you doing it again here in Photoshop? It's so that I can... Ooh, it's too much. So, let me see here. If I take away the sketch, you'll see the lines, and now the lines have like a different thickness. Once the lines are all put in, I can put color underneath the outline, kind of to color in the miniature, so to speak. I can experiment with different colors. If I want different colors that are different color shirts, different color skin, different color hair, hats, shoes, weapons, those can all be different layers. 90% of Photoshop is learning how to screw around with layers. And yeah, I just really wish this Wacom pad was working here. It's drawing fine. Obviously, as you can see, what it's not doing is letting me vary my length, or I'm sorry, vary my my width or my intensity of the line. So I'm having to go in here, like it's always uniform, notice? I'm having to go in there and kind of shallow out my lines with an eraser manually. Again, you can tough your way through it if your Wacom pad isn't entirely cooperating. It works all the time. In fact, I just bought this one, it's brand new. It's just, it doesn't always play well with OBS. It's got something to do with the graphics card or the display driver or something like that. But you guys did not come to the stream to listen to me complain about OBS. Actually, the real reason I'm running this stream is, again, I'm playing in Somalia, 1993, with Dylan in about another hour and a half. And I did not want the rest of the SITREP team to think I was goofing off. Like, yeah, it's great that you're doing Somalia, dude. We're all kind of working here on 13 days. Did you do anything on 13 days today? No, they're not being like that. I'm just kidding around. Yeah, so you can see how clunky these lines are. Not real happy with that. But the way to fix it is to basically restart Photoshop, to basically reinitialize that graphics driver, and it's not worth it. I mean, not right now. If I was working by myself without a streaming audience or whatever, and I was going to be doing it for another couple of hours, yeah, it takes 2 minutes. You just have to reboot. But then it makes for a clunky stream, so I don't want to do it. You guys didn't come to the stream to watch me playing around with, or trying to get my Photoshop to work. And again, we're going to have Dylan later on today, who is right now probably asleep. He's 15 hours ahead of me, time zone wise. It's going to be early Monday morning for him. Apparently he likes to get up early, because he is very willing to, on Mondays, get up at what's 6 o'clock in the morning for him to throw dice with us here on SITREP Podcast. Speaking of Dylan, he's also been putting a lot of work into his, I think it's another wargaming historian, or another historian wargamer. Hopefully I'm not getting the name wrong there. I might look it up on my phone in a second, because I don't want to give you the wrong name. In fact, let me go ahead and look this up, so you can go check him out on YouTube. It is another historian wargamer. He's got some painting videos up there now. He doesn't do anything modern, at least not lately. He did some stuff on the Rhodesian War a little while ago. but he's usually a little bit more of a Napoleonics. I think now he's getting some American Civil War and American War of Independence, French and Indian War, or 7 Years' War if you prefer. Stuff going over there on his channel. He's recently been doing a series on the music band, I think it's called Forlorn Hope. That is pretty awesome. It's one of those, it sounds crazy to say this, but it's one of those historical metal bands or whatever. It's like, you know, they sing all their songs about episodes of the... why isn't that working? Oh, because I have the wrong tool selected. Different episodes of the Napoleonic Wars, especially the Peninsula Wars, of course, that we all see in the Sharp series. Alright, so here's another way I'm able to cheat, so to speak. Come on. With my drawing, even though my Wacom pad is being a little high maintenance today, and that's with the smudge tool. Hotkey N in your Photoshop if you use hotkeys. So hopefully I'm able to, you know, smooth out my lines a little bit so that they're not quite so blatantly, for lack of a better description, Microsoft Paint. We don't want this to look like something was made in Microsoft Paint. Thank you, Wacom pad. That was totally not what I wanted. So when I'm drawing, one way to make your drawing look a little bit more realistic or whatever is, even if you have to use outlines, first of all, try not to use outlines. But again, these aren't really drawings so much as they are wargaming pieces or miniatures, so I'm using outlines. Because you want it to be very clear, you know, what they are. Even when you're painting a miniature traditionally, a lot of times there's a lot more outline, a lot more stark colors on your miniature than you would see in real life. The same general, principle applies when you're making e-pieces. But even if you have to draw, let me use this as an example here. First of all, let me level that out. So as you can see, these lines are not all of a uniform. Oh God, they're ugly. Oof. This is what happens when your Wacom pad doesn't work, guys. You wind up with lines like this. Oh my God. I'll have to clean that up a lot later. But no worries. Yeah, lines are not, of a uniform thickness. A lot of times you see people who do like, the inks or whatever in comic book art or whatever. In case there are any comic fans in the chat, it's like these lines right now are of a uniform width and a uniform weight, and I don't want them to be that way. They're only doing that because, again, OBS is kind of screwing with my Wacom pads. Interaction with other parts of my computer. I don't know if it's the driver or the graphics card. Anyway, that doesn't matter. The point is, you don't want your lines to be all like a uniform width. I'm kind of just filling them in that way for now, and then I'll clean them up later. Give them a little bit of a man boob there. And again, I'm leaving the head alone because I'm repurposing the head, hair, hats, and beard choices from my one-handed shooter file. I will probably only do one version of feet. Because again, all the weird kind of flip-flop ideas and so on, those are all already in my one-handed shooters. I'm going to choose to treat my two-handed shooters here a little more seriously. One thing that people tend to do is draw their feet backwards. Again, the feet are always sort of more pronounced on the inward side. That's where your big toe is. Your big toe is always on the inside of your foot. And one of the fastest ways to screw up feet in a drawing is to get that backwards. Big toes are always on the inside, thumbs are always on the inside. That can be a little tricky with hands because hands have these things called wrists, and wrists allow your hand to rotate. So obviously if you're holding your hand palm up, your thumbs are on the outside. If you're holding your hands palm down, you're looking at the back of your hand, which is the natural state of them, thumbs are inboard, so to speak. Palms are on the inside of your hand, or thumbs are on the inside of your hand. Very easy thing to get wrong. The more you draw figures and, sketch artists, kind of stuff. I've literally published on other websites figures with two left hands and didn't even realize it. And then somebody points it out in the comments. I'm like, oh, thanks. Now I feel like an idiot. Okay, so again, that is super rough because, again, my equipment is not really behaving right now. But I do already have, like I said, the head kind of filled in. Again, I just used it from my previous file. So I'm able to save a little bit of time there. Next question, do I have an AK ready to go? Does not look like it. I could have sworn I did. I've got this AK. Well, you know what? I'll go ahead and use this one. And no, actually, no, I won't, because I was gonna. Obviously, this is an AK. Again, viewed from the top. There's the upper receiver right there. There should be a big stock on the back of it. I was just going to draw my own wooden stock on the back of it super fast. The problem is you can also see where the folding collapsible stock is kind of underneath the weapon here. That's this big U shape. So if I went ahead and just got cheesy and slapped my own wooden stock on the back of this receiver here to make my own regular rifle model AK, I would wind up with a weapon with two stocks, and it would look kind of corny. Would most people notice? No, but one person would, and it would be something in the comments, and I'm not about that. Oh man, look at these lines. All right, I'm going to try and repair these lines as best I can. Normally, you wouldn't have to do this. You wouldn't have to go back over your lines and kind of taper them off like this. Use the smudge tool to kind of blend them out. The reason I have to here is, again, as I keep saying, my Wacom pad is being borderline. Well, let me not say it. It's being a little bitchy right now. So again, these variable strengths, weights, thicknesses of the lines is what you're kind of looking for. That's the kind of thing that you would probably see in... again, I'm just trying to think of things that people in the chat may have seen. If there's any like comic fans, a lot of comic artists are very good at this. Because for better or worse, comic book art relies heavily on lines, obviously. There's usually an ink, and then there's a colors guy. If you actually look at the credits of most comic art, there's not only two steps of the process. There's usually two different artists who do it. Something to do with UAC? Is that what's going on with my Wacom pad, Skobac? I take your word for it. It'll work all day, and then I will go in here like the way these lines in his upper arm right here in his bicep. That's exactly what I want. What I don't want are like the lines in his fingers. But anyway, the Wacom pad will work great through all day, and then I'll turn on OBS and it'll work initially. Then I'll start the stream and then it'll crash, or not crash. As you can see, it's working. It's just not working great. So the general rule is you want your line to be a lot thinner when you're doing an outside turn, and thicker when you're doing an inside turn. So this crook of the wrist right here, this crook of the wrist right here is an inside turn. This elbow is an outside turn. And that's where you want your variable length. Normally when the Wacom pad is functioning properly, you can just do all that in one fell swoop. And what you can do is, like let's say you were trying to draw a finger. So, okay, again, supersized finger just for a second here. Okay. Okay, there's the finger. That looks okay, but if you wanted to get real with it, what you can do is you can kind of thin out where it's the outside edges are, and leave your inside edges a little bit more pronounced. And what that's going to allow you to do, this is where the knuckles and the finger are, maybe a little bit of and that's where you wind up with that's not quite right. That's where you kind of wind up with a finger. Super fast. Again, you would do a better job on the fingernail or whatever, but that's why you want that variable width in there. So I'll probably come back later and I'll mess around with this guy a little bit and I'll try and clean up his lines a little bit. But for now, he's okay just for stream purposes. Up here in the corner, this little nebulous cloud, this is his buddy, his headless buddy, the one-handed shooter. And what I'm doing with him, the reason I saved that little piece here, is so I could use the eyedropper tool, grab a hold of his color. That way the color, I also could have grabbed it from his face, I guess. So in fact, you know what? I don't need you. Goodbye, one-handed shooter, because I've got your head. To sample colors from. Again, eyedropper tool, you select his head. You eyedropper tool, do a selection. It automatically grabs that RGB code and puts it on your paint palette. And now you're ready to start filling in the rest of this guy's body. I was able to save the head and just use the head twice. I could not do that with his torso, shoulder, and arms because, again, they're in a totally different position. One-handed shooter versus two-handed shooter, so I had to do that over again. Okay, so I got his color selected. I'm going to go to where I have the outline. Again, I know it sounds kind of weird. But I always name my layers. Because this is a rather simple drawing. There are some that are a lot more complicated. And in other words, there's a lot more layers involved. And it's easier to, I know I always say this, but it's easy to keep track of what the hell you're doing. So right now, layer 3 is going to be renamed just skin, and it has to be underneath the outline layer. So this table over here, if that's coming out on stream, let me move it in a little bit so you can see it easier. Not only it shows you what layers are showing, or what layers are in the drawing, the ones with the little eyeballs in the boxes, the radio boxes here, are showing you which ones are visible and which ones aren't. None of these are visible. These ones all are. And it shows you in what order, like picture one of those old transparencies like they used to use in high school, where you have different layers of transparent stuff, some of them with paintings on them, some of them with that. This is the order in which they show. So right now the skin is underneath the outline. So when I draw flesh tone, you see where it's underneath the the outline. You want it to be underneath the outline. If you had that the other way around, now it's on top of the outline, it doesn't look right. So I want it underneath the outline. And we're going to paint them up. Here's how fast it is to paint a miniature in Photoshop. Dun, 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 dun. Now after this, we're going to add some highlights. We're going to add some different colors. Oh no! Again, my Wacom pad is not working 100%. Decrease the size of my brush a little bit so I can get the more difficult parts. Again, you can do this with basically what I'm doing right now. I'm doing it with the equivalent of a mouse. I'm doing it the way most people draw in, like, again, Windows Paint, which again is possible. It's just a royal pain. Because my I'm not able to get any kind of real control over the angle or pressure of my paintbrush here. It would be like trying to paint a regular miniature with magic marker instead of with a paintbrush. In other words, it's always going on in the same thickness. It's always going on with the same weight. You can't control the amount of paint on your brush. You can't control how hard your brush is painting. You can pretty much just control where the paintbrush is, which is something. Again, we are progressing here, but some of these steps will be a lot faster. Some people might ask why. Obviously, as you can see here, it's so much easier to put your outline and your color as two different layers. It's just easier to do. I mean, a pain in the ass as it is, do it without a functioning Wacom pad. It's still 900 times easier to do it this way than it would be to try and do the color, like the flesh tone color, and the black outline as one Photoshop layer. Like right there, I kind of went outside the lines a little bit. It's like super easy to fix. I can erase this all day, paint a smiley face, I can do whatever I want, and it's not going to affect any of my other work because it's two different layers. I know that sounds really simple and I keep over explaining it. The applications, if you don't work with Photoshop or similar, there's lots of other choices out there now, but they're all pretty much the same general idea. What it allows you to do is crazy. Again, with one eye shut, barely a functioning Wacom pad, and talking to you guys on stream and so on, in 2 hours we were able to create a file on our earlier guy that allows, I think it's, if you do the math, it's something like 1,200 options for my Insurgent guy. I do remember that for my GRS guy, it's 720. Just by, again, being a little circumspect with your layers. I mean, how long would it take you to draw 720 figures, unique figures, all of them a little different? With a brush. Again, I realize that these outlines here are super rough. I'll come back and I'll clean them up later. But here we are with a little bit of skin texture on them. Now, next step, we want to get a little bit of shading. See how there's a little bit of shading here in his face, the bridge of his nose, his eye sockets, his cheekbones. Some of it's covered up by his beard. We're going to get a little bit more crazy with that. With the rest of his body, his shoulders, and his forearms here. So, with my lasso tool, feather selected to 0 pixels, because I want this to be precise. I'm going to grab and just sort of, this is where you have to kind of pay attention to your figure's anatomy. I'm just going to kind of grab where his where light is not going to be very strong on his, or where there are going to be shadows on his figure. So here where his shoulders kind of overshadow his tricep a little bit. The crook of the elbow, the inside of his hand, a little bit of the wrist. Over here to his forward arm. His fingers are going to be in full light, so we're leaving that alone. The rest of his hand is going to be underneath some sort of a weapon. Get a little bit of his obliques here. Oh, I didn't quite do that quite right. Alternate select, I'm able to reduce my selection, clean that up a little bit. Shift select allows you to grab more material, so to speak, and alternate select does the opposite. Oh no! Okay, so, oh, a little bit up here too. His other arm needs a little bit of attention. So I know this music sounds a little like Lord of the Rings. I assure you it's not. It was probably written to sound like it. Okay, so I've got everything here kind of pre-colored, or not pre-colored, I'm sorry, pre-selected. There's a couple things you can do here. You can just darken it as it stands. You can, what I'm probably going to do is you can just copy-paste it and make everything that's currently selected its own layer, and then that way you're free to darken or shade or modify it without affecting your pre-existing color underneath it. You would later then remerge those two color layers back into a single, layer color. In fact, let me just go ahead and do it that way. So it looks like I just lost my selections. I did not. What I actually did was I copy-pasted everything that was in there. That was selected in all those selections I made a second ago. So now I'm going to go to variations, and I'm just going to make this a little bit darker. Darker, add some red, add some blue. Reduce the saturation a smidge. Ooh, that did not come out well at all. Looks like he's got the measles. Okay, again, it's its own layer, so we can do whatever we want with it and not wreck our previous work. So I'm going to use a different tool here and see if I can't fix this. You see where it's all purple? It looks like he's in some kind of a nightclub or something. We're going to try and fix that. This is not working. Huh. Why can't I get this to... You know what it is? There's too much blue in this. And the opposite of blue, we have cayenne and blue. We're going opposite of cayenne and blue is yellow and red. I'm going to add some yellow and red to this. We're not really getting the best preview there. Okay, that's a little better. That's not what I wanted. Okay, that's a little better. Those shadows might look a little harsh. No worries. Again, it's its own layer. You can reduce the opacity of that. to kind of tone him down. We're trying to make the shadows on his body look like the shadows that pre-exist on his face. And I think right now we are pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. Again, remerge my shading layers with my whatchamacallit layers. Actually, I'm not going to do that yet. Alt-Control-Z backs me up a step. Use my smudge tool to, like this one here. Let me back that up a little bit. Nope, that's too much. Just to make these shadows look a little bit more natural and organic. And shadows, you know, on a human body don't normally end on very sharp lines. Again, it's up to your art style. There are, I'm sure, some graphic artists, some comic artists that like to draw them this way. I like to soften my stuff a little bit so that it doesn't quite look so surreal. Go for a little bit more of a realistic look. And unless you're in really harsh light, shadows in general, much less on something relatively smooth like human skin, do not end that abruptly. They're not quite that abrupt. In most cases. So you see here where I'm like super smudging out and blending out the shadows that are like just like on his skin. Like, okay, underneath his armpit here, and then into his pec here, it's maybe a little bit more, you know, blended out. The shadows between his palm and the tips of his fingers are going to remain sharp because that's not a blended shadow. His fingers are literally in front of his the inside of his hand there, so I'm going to leave those sharp. The ones where his face and head are over top of his shoulders and upper chest, those are going to remain, you know, pretty sharp. Then I'm going to take my burn tool, and I'm going to get into his the parts of his shadows that are really intense, i.e., you know, underneath his make that a little bit smaller so it's easier to control. Yeah, stuff like this. Some shadows are very harsh, some shadows are more gentle. We're going to aim now at the really sharp ones. One thing I don't like about Photoshop is when you're using the burn tool to create a deeper shadow on a colored surface. This doesn't work well with this doesn't really happen with black and white, but with colored, you know, you're trying to darken a shadow on a colored surface, it kind of takes away some of the saturation as well. So notice here in his the junction between his shoulder, his armpit, and his elbow here is going to be a really dark shadow. As I tried to darken it, it took away a lot of the color. It's coming in more, not only darker but more gray. So I have to go back in here and manually resaturate it. A little annoying, but no worries. What I might do is just darken that manually. Wrong tool. Go to shadows. Alright, again, they're normally going to be wearing shirts, so it's not that big a deal. But that's kind of what it's kind of where we are. Okay, now I'll go ahead and merge my shadow layer and my regular skin layer, my color layer. And now we've got a guy there that's got some basic skin. Again, I'm going to clean up those images. I'm going to clean up those lines a little bit later. Because they're not really as smooth as I like. We got a few minutes left, so I will get started on some raggedy jeans. I want his jeans, I'm going to start with a denim blue for this first option of jeans. I want it to be under his skin because obviously the jeans are underneath in layers. His jeans are underneath his forearm here, underneath his stomach, his abdomen here, underneath this arm. And then when we get to shoes, the shoes are going to be underneath the jeans. So I'm going to call this, I'm starting a new layer. I'm going to call it pants. Pants is going to go underneath skin. And now that I make sure that I have the right layer selected, I'm going to go in here with some with a paintbrush, make sure I have my right color selected, and put some pants on this boy. And again, as you can see, I'm being very sloppy with the way I'm putting it on here. It doesn't matter because I have my layers in the right order. So I can overstep as much as I want here into his beard, his face, his chest. It doesn't matter because it's underneath those layers. Half of Photoshop, again, is manipulation of layers, and half the reason you manipulate layers the way you do is to save yourself work. Like, the pants were literally that easy. Again, my dodge tool here, I'm sorry, my burn tool here, not aiming at shadows, aiming at midtones. 50% is a touch much. Knock it down to 25 or so. Come back in here and put in a little bit of shadow in some judicious places. Alright, and last but not least, some super fast shoes. Shoes are going to go underneath pants. White shoes are not white, they're a very light gray. And let me go ahead and, oops, that's the wrong tool. Brush. Alright, now, okay, because I want to have a couple different options for shoes. I'm going to break my own rule here just a little bit. And we're going to put outline on the same layer as the shoe. Because the different options for different shoes aren't just the color of the shoe. There's going to be flip-flops, there's going to be boots, there's going to be sneakers, and the shape of the footwear is different as well as the color. So back to my outline, what I'm actually going to do here, believe it or not, is destroy my outline, or erase my outline. That's my master outline. I'm not going to use the master outline for shoes. Shoes are going to have their own outline. Go back to my shoe layer, make sure I have black selected, go into my brush, get my brush back down to a decent length, or a decent width for lines. Again, curse my Wacom pad for not working. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted, Machine. How did you know? How did you know? You must have read my mind. Anyone who says computers don't have a mind of their own and can't respond to, aren't aware of your displeasure, has not worked with computers very much. They know what you're saying, man. They know when you're upset. That's half the reason they do the things they do. Little bastards. Alright. A little bit of a variable width in my line here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and put in some super fast details on his kicks. That might be a little extreme. Let me try that again. Eh. It's not perfect, but it will do for now. No. Who am I kidding? It will be perfect. Because I hate my life. Alright. The shoe looked a little lopsided to me, so I'm going to try and fix it a little bit. And I'm probably putting way too much work into this. So what I'm doing is using the X shortcut key to very quickly switch between my background and foreground color. At least in theory. There we go. What that allows me to do is to kind of quickly, oh come on, work, to fix my shoelaces there. That looks low. We're getting closer. That looks a little closer. And that other shoe is so far under his elbow, it doesn't really seem to matter very much. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my sketch layers. Because again, now it's all going to be clean up, different colors of shirt, different color of clothes, different styles of pants, different weapons, and so on and so forth. So, and again, I've got my little miniature there, or I should say my little base. That was super easy. That's a circular piece. You use the layer tool in Photoshop. You look at pattern overlay. There are some earth tones that come with the Photoshop or whatever, some rocks and some pebbles. You find one that you like. You're able to scale it so that your rocks are super big or super small. You're able to adjust its opacity, which interacts with whatever color that you have selected underneath it. And I have a stroke layer style attached to it. That's that brown circle around the edge of it. And then a simple drop shadow. And now it almost looks like a miniature. Another thing that I would do, well, this is really going to be tough without a working Wacom pad. So I might not finish this now. Let me get rid of the old shadow. Now, the quick and easy way to do this would just be to use, all of this, the guy, the figure, and apply a drop shadow underneath that using the layer style tool in Photoshop. There are two basic reasons that won't work here. Number one, our guy here is made up of like 6 or 7 different layers. By the time I get done with him, he's going to have about 20 or 30 different layers into him. Different beards, different hats, different shoes, So what do you use for your shadow layer? Again, you'd have to apply a shadow to all of them. You can't do that because then his beard is going to be casting a shadow over his chest. It's going to look like a mess. And number two, his shoes and his pants, in other words, the parts of his figure that are closer to the ground are going to be casting a much more pronounced shadow than, say, his forearm. You don't want the shadow of his forearm on the base of the figure to look as pronounced as the shadow of his shoes or his pants. It's not going to look right. You're going to lose any kind of a 3D effect or faux effect from your shadow that way. So we're not going to do that. Sometimes the best option is the brute force manual version. So here's my layer. Basically, I'm going to create a new layer like I always do. Half of Photoshop is creating new layers. This one is going to be shadow. It's not going to be the same shadow as the shadow on my previous figure. I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, right now that layer is empty. Select black because I want my layer to be black. Reduce hardness of my paintbrush all the way down to 0 because I want this to be as cloudy as possible. Reduce the size of the brush a little bit. Reduce the opacity because I don't want it to be like stark black. I'll just go to 2/3 for now. So somewhere in the 60%. Okay, and now as I'm drawing right now. Why is nothing happening? Again, it's underneath the head, the chest, the pants, so you can't see anything. What you want to do is you want to... okay, now why is nothing happening? Because I have eraser selected after all that yammering. Sorry about that, guys. Alright. There we go. Like back there by the back of his head. You see a little bit of a shadow starting to grow there. His other shoulder, his pants, his shoes, under his the front of his pants there. Reduce this a little bit. It's a little bit too big. And then again, because I have opacity set at like 60% or so, I can go over it. And again, now it's 60% on top of 60%. You can pretty much layer your shadow, the strength of your shadow there. So again, there's no shadow under his forearm. Would the forearm really be casting? Maybe on like bright sun, noon daylight or whatever, but normally no. Where you want your shadow to look is your pants and your shoes. And you want to fill in the corners more than anything else. And you don't want to overdo it, so that would pretty much be it right there. I don't really have an AK ready for him right now, but if I grabbed, say, an AKSU from one of my other bad guy figures. Again, that's the AK with the folded stock. Again, he's not really designed for that, so it's not really a perfect fit. But just to kind of close out the stream, if I increase the size of this weapon to heroic scale, it would start to look a little like this. That's kind of what we're aiming at. Again, this guy is not finished. I want to clean up those lines. I want to add some more shadow, some more highlights to his figure. In fact, let's go ahead and add some highlights. We got a few more minutes. I'm not due in Somalia / Australia for another 42 minutes. Ooh, that's too much. He's been in the sun too long. Judicious highlights there, just where you really need... Oh, that's a little too much there. Why can't I use the fill tool? I'm asked in the chat. Are we talking about, I assume we're talking about the bucket tool, the K tool? I don't really like it for two reasons. Number one, it's a good question. So I'm assuming we're talking about the bucket tool, which right now isn't even on the paint bucket tool. And again, that's a very sort of a Microsoft Paint 3.1 kind of a thing. Okay, so we're talking about, let's say, we're filling in his skin, like back when, before we added all the shading and highlighting or whatever. Okay, well notice in a well-drawn figure, which this is not yet, but in a well-drawn figure, you would have very, very thin lines, or in a really well-drawn figure, you'd have no lines when you were done with it. Believe it or not, real life does not come outlined in black lines. You know, if you look at your forearm right now, there's no black outline around your flesh tone there. So as you can see, if I had just hit the, in fact, let's go ahead and do it just to kind of demonstrate. So I'm going to select skin. I'm on the skin. I've got the skin tone I want. I got the bucket tool. Number one, it looks raggedy. Number two, you see where it's going to burst through where there is no black line or whatever. Also, that black line is on a whole different layer, so it's not going to interact with that. Basically, your bucket tool, your paint bucket tool, your fill tool is not going to pay attention to data contained in the black outline because that's on a different layer. Long story short, it just doesn't work for a number of reasons. It also produces a very bad drawing, which this definitely is at the moment. This guy needs a lot of work, but he will get it. By the time he's in Benghazi and he's ready to face off against our GRS guys, he's going to be styling and profiling, so to speak. He's going to be all set. But for now, he started. This is the beginnings of my two-handed shooter figure. That's going to go with my one-handed shooter figure, my GRS figures, my unarmed interpreter figures, and eventually my unarmed civilian figures. And all those are going to get put together into a photoshopped map, and that's going to be our electronic game for the transit game, or I should say it's going to be for our electronic transit game for our 13 days to 13 hours ongoing project here on SitRep Podcast. So again, we're going to be back on in a little bit over half an hour, 38 minutes according to my clock. We're going to be back on with Australia here on Twitch, also on YouTube, sitreppodcast.com. Check us out. We're going to be back. We're going to be looking at some parts of, Battle of Mogadishu. This is Black Hawk Down, October 3rd, 1993. We're going to be doing that in another Valorant Victory expansion. It's not going to be a design game, a design stream. It's going to be an actual war game. We're going to be on live with Dylan over in Australia. We're going to be chucking some dice. And we're going to see if the Rangers can reach one of our crashed Blackhawks before Mohammed Farah Adid's SNA militia can stop them. We're going to have Humvees, we're going to have Somali technicals, Somali militia, civilians, Rangers, Ranger officers, or I should say leaders, and civilians, and casualties at the crash site. We're going to see if we can have things turn out a little bit different there than did historically. Not a terribly historic game, sort of like a sample. Here's sort of the kind of thing that was going on that day. It's not going to be like the Super 6-1 or the Super 6-4 crash site. It's not going to have Eversman, Steele, McKnight, Walcott, any of the actual, the actual people who were there. It's more of a generic look at that kind of battle. But again, we're play testing. We're going to see how it works. Expanding Valorant Victory still further out of the 1940s through the 1960s, 70s. I've done 2 scenarios in the 1980s, Falklands and Lebanon, and now we're going to push it into the 1990s. We're going to add one more decade to our Valorant Victory portfolio, if it works. Again, these Rangers are getting so powerful that they're about to break the system. And I'll explain all that in our stream in about half an hour, 36 minutes. So for now, everybody, thanks very much for checking us out. And we'll be back, again, in about half an hour with another SitRep podcast stream. I hope to see some of you then. All right, everybody, take it easy and take care.
Are you looking to become a Tier 1 operator in the gaming world? Elevate your games with Black Site Studio Terrain.